The wind blew Ursula's face, and her clothes cleaved to her limbs. But it was a surging, turgid wind, instinct with compressed vigour of life, and she seemed to have lost Skrebensky. Out there in the strong, urgent night she could not find him. "Where are you?" she asked. "Here," came his bodiless voice, and groping she touched him. A fire like lightning drenched them. "Anton," she said. "What?" he answered. She held him with her hands in the darkness. She felt his body again with hers. "Don't leave me. Come back to me," she said. "Yes," he said, holding her in his arms. But the male in him was scotched by the knowledge that she was not under his spell nor his influence. He wanted to go away from her. He rested in the knowledge that tomorrow he was going away. His life was really elsewhere. His life was elsewhere. His life was elsewhere. The centre of his life was not what she would have. She was different. There was a breach between them. They were hostile worlds. "You will come back to me," she reiterated. "Yes," he said, and he meant it, but as one keeps an appointment, not as a man returning to his fulfilment. So she kissed him and went indoors, lost. He walked down to the marsh abstracted. The contact with her hurt him and threatened him. He shrank. He had to be free of her spirit, for she would stand before him, like the angel before Balaam, and drive him back with a sword from the way he was going, into a wilderness. The next day she went to the station to see him go. She looked at him, she turned to him, but he was always so strange and null, so null. He was so collected. She thought it was that which made him null. Strangely nothing he was. Ursula stood near him with a mute, pale face which he would rather not see. There seemed some shame at the very root of life, old, dead shame for her. The three made a noticeable group on the station, the girl in her fur cap and tippet and her olive green costume, pale, tense with youth, isolated, unyielding. The soldierly young man in a crush hat and a heavy overcoat, his face rather pale and reserved above his purple scarf, his whole figure neutral. Then the elder man, a fashionable bowler hat pressed low over his dark brows, his face warm-coloured and calm, his whole figure curiously suggestive of full-blooded indifference. He was the eternal audience, the chorus, the spectator at the drama. In his own life he would have no drama. The train was rushing up. Ursula's heart heaved, but the ice was frozen too strong upon it. "Good-bye," she said, lifting her hand, her face laughing with her peculiar, blind, almost dazzling laugh. She wondered what he was doing. "Good-bye," she said, again. He picked up his little bag and turned his back on her. There was a hurry along the train. Ah, here was his carriage. He took his seat. Tom Brangwen shut the door, and the two men shook hands as the whistle went. "Good-bye, and good luck," said Brangwen. "Thank you. Good-bye." The train moved off. Skrebensky stood at the carriage window, waving, but not really looking at the two figures, the girl and the warm-coloured, almost effeminately dressed man. Ursula waved her handkerchief. The train gathered speed. It grew smaller and smaller. Still it ran in a straight line. The speck of white vanished. The rear of the train was small in the distance. Still she stood on the platform, feeling a great emptiness about her. In spite of herself, her mouth was quivering. She did not want to cry. Her heart was dead cold. Her Uncle Tom had gone to an automatic machine. and was getting matches. "Would you like some sweets?" he said, turning round. Her face was covered with tears. She made curious, downward grimaces with her mouth to get control. Yet her heart was not crying. It was cold and earthy. "What kind would you like? Any?" persisted her uncle. "I should love some peppermint drops," she said, in a strange, normal voice from her distorted face. But in a few moments she had gained control of herself, and was still, detached. "Let us go into the town," he said, and he rushed her into a train, moving to the town station. They went to a café to drink coffee. She sat looking at people in the street, and a great wound was in her breast, a cold imperturbability in her soul. This cold imperturbability of spirit continued in her now. It was as if some disillusion had frozen upon her, a hard frozen upon her, a hard disbelief. Part of her had gone cold, apathetic. She was too young, too baffled to understand, or even to know that she suffered much, and she was too deeply hurt to submit. She had her blind agonies. When she wanted him, she wanted him. But from the moment of his departure, he had become a visionary thing of her own. All her roused torment and passion and yearning she turned to him. She kept a diary in which she wrote impulsive thoughts. Seeing the moon in the sky, her own heart surcharged, she went and wrote, "If I were the moon, I know where I would fall down." It meant so much to her, that sentence. She put into it all the anguish of her youth and her young passion and yearning. She called to him from her heart wherever she went. Her limbs vibrated with anguish towards him wherever she was. The radiating force of her soul seemed to travel to him endlessly, and in her soul's own creation find him. But who was he, and where did he exist? In her own desire only. She received a postcard from him, and she put it in her bosom. It did not mean much to her, really. The second day she lost it, and never even remembered she had had it, till some days afterwards. The long weeks went by. There came the constant bad news of the war, and she felt as if all, outside there in the world, were a hurt against her, and something in her soul remained cold, apathetic, unchanging. Her life was always only partial at this time, never did she live completely. There was the cold, unliving part of her, yet she was madly sensitive. She could not bear herself. When a dirty, red-eyed old woman came begging of her in the street, she started away as from an unclean thing. And then, when the old woman shouted after her, she winced. Her limbs palpitated with insane torment. She could not bear herself. Whenever she thought of the red-eyed old woman, a sort of madness ran, in inflammation over her flesh and her brain. She almost wanted to kill herself. And in this state, her sexual life flamed into a kind of disease within her. She was so overwrought and sensitive that the mere touch of coarse wool seemed to tear her nerves. End of chapter 11.